my name is Jacqueline Bautry and I'm here today with Professor Emeritus Acram Taji. Akram is a global humanitarian educator holding degrees from the University of Tehran in Iran, Sydney and Flinders University in Australia and Harvard in the USA. Welcome, Akram. Lovely to have you here.
Thank you.
Just to start with, if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your journey to date.
Sure. As you indicated, these days I'm a global humanitarian educator, but I came to Australia almost 50 years ago. Next year I will celebrate 50 years of my anniversary in Australia. I had a scholarship from Shah's government after I finished my first degree in the area of agricultural science and came to Australia and arrived here on March 31st in 1971. And it was a very different Australia to what it is right now. I couldn't speak English, and so I have to learn English very quickly. And so the first 9 months I was studying English, and my teacher was the famous Mem Fox, who is now a famous children's author. Then she wasn't famous. She was a mom at home and she was doing this job as a kind of a side thing while she was raising her young family. After I completed my English course, I went to Sydney University. I obtained a degree from Sydney University and then Flinders University, where I completed my PhD. And the day I submitted my PhD degree, I also had my own daughter. Because I knew I was going to have a cesarean section, I aimed very nicely to the last minute. So I wrote to my PhD supervisor, because I was away from the university, that my thesis is all finalized, and he wrote back and he said, yes, you can now submit. After which I became a young mom at home. Later, after when my daughter went to kindergarten prep school, I then started looking for some jobs to provide a little bit of purpose to my own life, an educational purpose, which I'm very, very passionate about. And I've been very, very lucky to have amazingly wonderful jobs. I job shared with a woman in the Department of Environment in Adelaide for a number of years. She was a young mom, I was a young mom, so we job shared and we did a lot of research on Australian flora. Then my husband moved to University of New England in Armidale, so I went to University of New England and I started working as a very junior academic in botany department, and then just made my way up the ladder. And I enjoyed working in University of New England for quite a number of years. And in between, I also went to University of the South Pacific in Fiji. And then in 2007, because my family had moved to Queensland in 2007, I came and I was working in Queensland University of Technology until 2014. These days, I travel around the globe. I work in many developing countries. I fund all those travels myself because I'm passionate about high-level educations in developing countries. So I go to Nepal, to Bhutan, to Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Iran. These are just some of the countries that just comes to my head right now. And supporting not only my academic colleagues and researchers, but also their students. I supervise PhD students with my academic colleagues in other countries. I examine their PhD thesis. I review journal articles, and I'm on editorial boards of a number of journals for many of these developing countries. So my focus is largely developing countries, because I know in developed world like Australia, New Zealand, UK, Canada, US, the system is amazingly good and very high quality. How could we transfer this high quality of education to some of these countries so they can raise their game? Is very important. I hold positions in universities in Thailand, and I almost every year I go to Thailand. I also go to Japan. And the reason I hold positions in Meiji University in Japan and go to Japan quite often is, again, their system of education is so different from Australia. The Asian country system of education is that you, as the professor, they think you're God and you just talk, and they're all sitting there politely taking note. Yeah. Which is not the case. Very different from our system of education. So I go there to introduce an education revolution in those countries.
That's wonderful. So it's not a surprise that on Australia Day this year you were awarded an Order of Australia for horticultural science and plant biotechnology. Could you please tell us a little bit about that and what that experience was like and how you came to that point?
Sure. My first degree was in agriculture science. My major was horticulture and plant physiology. When I came to Australia, I went to Sydney University, where I did my research with late Professor Michael Mullins in the area of horticulture. And that's where I was introduced to Australian flora and area of, the beginning of biotechnology. Then I moved to Flinders University, where I did my PhD, and my PhD is in crop physiology, plant physiology. When I was a young mom at home after I finished my PhD, one day my PhD supervisor rang me and said, "I want you to develop a course in biotechnology." And I'm thinking, what is biotechnology? So I plucked courage and I said, "Prof, what is biotechnology?" And he said, "Well, I have no idea. That's why I want you to go and develop a course." So I went to the libraries, to Adelaide University, to Flinders University, collected as much information as I could, and I came up with a course. And I gave it to my prof, and he read through it, and a few weeks later he rang me and he said, "Yep, it's in a good shape. We are going to be putting it to the Board of Studies and Academic Board for approval." And by 1982 we were teaching plant biotechnology in Flinders University, the very first university ever having a course in biotechnology. Before that, no one in Australia was doing biotechnology. And of course, these days biotechnology is everywhere. Of course, my biotechnology is from an agriculture perspective, from a plant perspective. So whatever we did in vitro plant breeding, antherculture, in vitro fertilization, plant tissue culture, they were all around plants. But we do have, I'm aware that medical biotechnology is massive. Animal biotechnology is huge. Microbiology, microbiotechnology in microbiology is quite massive. And right now with coronavirus, that is kind of dominating the news every day, it is biotechnological advancement is helping us to understand more about all this kind of thing. So I was one of the very first people who ever learned about biotechnology in this country and applied it to Australian native plants. So I have got an award from International Association for Plant Biotechnology for my research, cutting edge research in this area. And my Order of Australia has focused on my passion for education, which I do a lot, whether it's undergrad teaching, postgrad teaching during my academic career, or it's for my research, which has been in plant physiology, horticulture science, plant biotechnology, but mostly with focus on Australian flora, especially in the last 30 years or 35
Amazing.
years.
So what positions do you hold right now? And if you could talk about some of those leadership positions, which you've just touched on, and a little bit more about the work that you've been doing recently.
I am kind of a semi-retired. I don't hold any official position in any of the universities, but I do travel to many countries. I'm distinguished visiting professors in a number of universities overseas and emeritus professor in a number of universities. I teach in Chiang Mai Rajabat University in Thailand. I teach in Udayana University and I attend conferences there. In Bali, and everyone goes, "Oh, you go to Bali for holiday?" No, I go to Bali for work, I am a visiting distinguished professor in Colombo University in Sri Lanka, in Tribhuvan University in Nepal, you name it. So it's a long list of universities that I'm engaged and work with academic colleagues. Some of these people have been my own PhD graduates who have gone back to their countries and they're doing amazing work. So my job is to support them so they can move to the next level. Most of these graduates are women, but there are also men. I support both men and women, but of course I like to support more women because always is a little bit harder for women to reach to positions of leadership. And my advice has always been, especially to women who are from culturally and linguistically diverse background, is that, of course, you have got good ideas like anyone else. Yeah. Of course, you can reach to leadership positions, but you have to have certain, capabilities. Those capabilities is that you have to work hard. There is no other way about it. The second thing is that every now and then have a good laugh at yourself. Have that sense of humor that, it's not all serious. And if you make a mistake, you just have a good laugh at it. The third one is to have generosity of spirit. Share what you know with others. And by sharing and supporting your colleagues, you will have a much better communities around you. My reasoning has always been, if my neighbor is in a good shape, I'm going to be in a good shape. So if these developing countries like Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Iran, Sri Lanka, if they are in a good shape educationally, other parts of the world will be in a good shape. And the last thing is, in getting to anywhere in life, is never take no for an answer. There will always be people that will be people who would say, no, this cannot be done. No, you can't do this, Let it stand, go back the next day, push from a different angle, come with, a different proposal, modify it a little bit, and eventually you will get there. And that's how I have been very highly successful. I was the first female in the history of University of New England in Armidale to become a full professor in year 2000. And I remember I was being interviewed, how come that you are a full professor now, Not an Australian woman, not a white woman, but a woman from culturally and linguistically diverse background. Yeah. And my answer was, why haven't we had this happening before? Yeah. But I've been lucky because I have encountered some amazingly wonderful people in my journey. Some of them men, but some of them women. Yeah. The best vice chancellor I ever had was Professor Ingrid Moses in University of New England, because she herself was German. She herself was mother. So she understood that these poor women, how women are suffering trying to get to any level. So she was a great supporter of women and provided good mentorship. And I remain grateful to her mentorship. And she has remained my mentor. Yeah. I still admire her. She's 76 or 77 years of age and retired, but I still consider her a great mentor and a great supporter and a role model I can look up to. So if you have women like that in your life, then your chances of success is good. Programs like this, I think, are very, very important because a lot of young girls are maybe watching this program. Yeah. And they think, if she can do it, I could do it too. Absolutely. Because you have to show to others that it is doable. It is possible. Even for people who speak English with an accent. Yes. Even people who come from other parts of the world, because there is this thing, certainly in academia of my era, there was this thing that was called unconscious bias. A group of white men, I was in a department, 13 men, all white men, and me. So every time you opened your mouth to say something, to them it was just kind of strange that, we have a woman in the department. Yeah. So how do you get your colleagues to eventually accept and understand your ideas and suggestions needs a lot of work. Academia is getting a little bit better, but still is largely the domain of men. Many years ago, I wrote an article about position of women in academia. And the position was that if you are a white man, you get a grant, no problem. Then it was a white woman. Then it was a men of color. Then it was women of color. So women of color had to work 3 or 4 times harder to be able to get a grant for their research. And there was a paper published about it in the Nature. Things have changed. Things have become better because merit is important, and we must promote people on merit, not what color they are, what sex, what gender they are, etc. So we have come a long way, but still we have a long way to go to. Because my own daughter, she's a medical doctor. Of course, medicine is dominated by women, which is wonderful. Of course, men can go to medicine, and we've got men doctors. But she said invariably, sometimes when you ring somewhere, they think you are the nurse, not the director or the head. Still that exists. She's of course also teaching. She's deputy dean in a faculty of medicine. She's involved in teaching, doing amazing things. But she says exactly the same sort of things that I say, that still there are a lot of men who are in positions, leadership and power. So, and my advice to her and other young women is that the only way you can change is not to stand outside the tent and shout, but get in there and start effecting change. And with it, then you will be able to make some changes. Luckily, we now have got more women who are vice chancellors of universities, more women who are CEOs becoming CEOs of companies and so on. But
showing the pathways.
Yes, absolutely. So I want to transfer all these kind of things to other countries, because you go to some countries and you see that a lot of men, heads of the departments, deans of the faculties, and some women, great women, amazingly intelligent and productive women, but, they seem not to be getting where they want to get. So how do you make that transformation? Is by giving your own example.
You talked a little bit earlier when we were off camera about the flip classroom and that style of teaching. Can you talk to us a little bit about that in these contexts that you're in, these other countries that you're going to, and how that transfers?
I mean, the thing is that teaching and learning is a sort of a evolving all the time. Good teaching is about evolution, about change, and go with the time. These days, if you're not teaching using Twitter or Facebook or Instagram as part of your teaching, or the technology, any kind of technology, your teaching may not be considered as good. But I think the important thing in teaching is that how to use your own students as collaborators in teaching and learning. So when I was in University of New England, and I remember when I put this idea on the table to my colleagues, they all kind of freaked out. Oh my goodness, you want to get the students to teach, The thing was that, firstly, I created block teaching. Right now, block teaching is flavor of the month, and everyone talks about block teaching, and we can do block teaching that one subject you teach in 1 month and you're out of the way, or you can have, in my case, was 1 day a week was horticulture science at University of New England. So I went to the head of the department and I said, the head of the school, and I said, I want to block teach. First he said to me, what on earth is block teaching? And then the second thing was that, let me have a look and see which day would be the best day for block teaching. He came out with Friday. Now in University of New England, Friday is considered golf day, and no student will come to any lectures, especially if it's an elective subject. However, I managed to get the students coming, and the class would start at 10. I would set the scene by talking about a topic. Then there was a discussion. Then there was debate. So I would make the students work beforehand, develop the ideas and so on, rather than me just talk, and they fall asleep because they had a heavy night the night before. I wanted them to be engaged in whatever I was teaching. We would have prac classes, we would have field trips, we would visit industry. But also, if the student came and said, "Oh, can you teach about apples?" and I would say, "No, I don't. But you can give a lecture on apples if you are interested in apples or vegetables or organic horticulture." So that way I brought the students. So we would have 2 or 3 days, what I called student symposia, that the students would give lectures. We would create a little abstract book. The students would have to introduce other students. So it was a lovely way of helping them to become good speakers, but also helping me not to be giving all these huge range of topics, give lectures on this huge range of topics. So these days we call this kind of a flipped classroom, that the students are supposed to prepare things, come to the class and have a discussion. Those days I didn't have a name. I just said to the students, "You are my collaborator, so we are going to be learning together."
Yeah. And how is that received in different cultures outside of Australia?
Yes, that is actually a difficult task in many cultures. I was Googling this flipped classroom in Japan, and I noticed actually they're doing it even in their high schools now. And I think this idea is permeating, and if you start it in high school, the earlier you start, the better all this could become. So, the students say, "Oh, okay, I have to prepare something, I have to present a 2 minutes talk, etc." And when by the time they get to university for their undergrad, they are well and truly attuned to it. But if you're going to be introducing it late, then it becomes difficult. In some countries, they think, "Oh, this is a novel way of teaching," but they're all, most of my colleagues are embracing it, and most of them, they are trialing it in some ways in some of their subjects. And slowly, because do students learn because we have been just teaching? This is the question we have to ask. How do they learn? And this is, I always ask the student, "How do you learn?" And they go, "Oh, how do I learn?" Because learning happens in so many different ways. You learn because you talk about something. You learn because you read something. You learn because you hear something. You learn because you do something, So if you combine all that, then you have a very rich environment for learning. And you have accommodated all form of learnings, So flipped classroom basically is that, how do we accommodate all kind of learning and make sure our students at the end of it have learned or know how to learn? That's important, because for the rest of our lives, this is lifelong learning, is that we just have to learn new ways. Technology is changing all the time, And one of the things that people keep talking right now, we are talking about the jobs of the future. Are we preparing our students for the jobs of the future? And I remember it was last year, and I was in Sydney, and I was watching television. It was just before, on Monday, the day before school go back on Tuesday. And they were interviewing a bunch of principals and teachers and so on. And the interviewer asked one of the principals, said, "So, how do you know what you're teaching in high school that prepares the students for the jobs of the future?" And I thought his answer was just beautiful. He said, "We don't. We don't know what we teach is going to be useful to the students in future. But if we teach our students the fundamentals," and by that I think he meant English, mathematics, these are the fundamentals. If we teach them the fundamentals, and if we teach them the transferable skills are the skills of communication, clear communication, good team working, social responsibilities. These are part of the transferable skills. If we teach them good transferable skills, then we have put them in good stead for their future. Then when they go to university, and university is another place, everyone says, "Oh, the expectation is that the students will be job ready by the time they finish their university." But if we don't know what the jobs are, how do we know they're job ready? So if we teach the students to think, so when the students would come to me and say, do you teach this, do you teach this? And my answer is, no, I don't teach any of those things. So what do you do? And I always tell students, I'm going to make you think, because that is important, to problem solve, to look at something analytically and analyze it and be able to solve problems. When I was young, I used to think I'm a teacher and I'm here to teach you. Then I thought, I'm here to facilitate your learning, because everyone learns different way, so my job is to facilitate learning. Now I give 2 lectures in first year biology, and my lectures are, I'm a provocateur, and I tell students here, I'm here to provoke your thinking. And at the end of each lecture, I ask them, so was your thinking provoked? And the type of questions they ask clearly shows that I raise their consciousness about issues. Because the professors of the past, they had all the information in their head, and they came to the class and they taught, and we took notes madly. This was the way I learned back in Iran. We had the textbooks, then we would go home and we'd look at the notes, look at the textbook, and come up with a series of notes that we would review the night before exam. Whereas as the technology has changed, now we've got Professor Google. Professor Google knows everything. He or she has every bit of information. So it's no good to give information to the students, because they're all accessible through internet. So our job is that how we make sense of these disparate information and join them together to become knowledge for students. And I always tell students, information is not knowledge, and knowledge is not wisdom. So the students say, so how do we become wise? I say, oh, well, that comes with age. And that's the case. Part of it is with age, but as long as our students become knowledgeable in certain field, it's great. But should they know, exactly that? I'm just so glad that now medicine is a postgraduate. So you have to do a first degree to grow up, to have, understand the world. Do I want to be a doctor? Do I want to? And then go and do medicine as a postgrad, rather than just as an undergrad. By the time you're 24, you're let loose in the world. You have no idea how to interact with patients. Most of us at 23, 24 have no idea. Whereas if we let loose at 28, 29, that few years makes a huge difference. So to me, and when people say, what degree my child should study? I say, any degree he or she likes, because first degree is only first degree. And from there, he or she can move there, and build on it or change completely. So a generalist degree, and some big universities now just offer a generalist degree, a double degree, Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science. UQ does it. University of ANU, Bachelor of Philosophy. But what is Bachelor of Philosophy? It's just mishmash of all sorts of areas to help you grow and expand your mind and your
thinking.
Exactly.
Provoke the learning.
Exactly.
Amazing. I think you sort of covered a lot of the questions that we have, but I guess just going back to women from linguistically and culturally diverse backgrounds, and you talked about those top items. Today in 2020, are there things that you see now that were different to when you arrived in 1971? Like some of those challenges that they might face in Australia that could be a little bit different, I guess.
Yes. Oh, look, absolutely. I mean, there are the challenge of the language, the culture that they come from. There are people from different religious backgrounds, women that because of their religions, they are covering themselves. How are they accepted in the workplace? Still there are some issues with them. You have a strong accent, and there are people that they go, oh, I don't understand that person, So we need to just work through all those kind of issues. At the end of the day, we have to be ourselves and be genuine. And being yourself and genuine, people eventually are receptive of who you are and what you do. But the most important thing is never take no for an answer. Because if you take no for an answer, you will never move from where you are.
Yeah.
If you want to move forward, you just have to say, I have to find a different way to get there.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today, Acram.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thanks.